Welcome to this analytical journey through Tractate Chullin, pages 24a-b. Today we're exploring what I call a tale of two ministries, the distinct qualifications of Kohanim, and the Leviim, in temple service. This passage presents us with a fascinating paradox. Two groups, both devoted to sacred service, yet disqualified by entirely different criteria. The Kohanim are disqualified by physical blemish but serve for life, while the Leviim are disqualified by age but remain unaffected by physical imperfections. It's a study in complementary opposition, a perfect balance of what makes each ministry unique. Mishna opens with a striking statement. כאשר בכהנים פסול בלוויים, כאשר בלוויים פסול בכהנים, there is an element with which Kohanim remain fit and the Leviim are unfit. And there is also an element with which Leviim remain fit and the Kohanim are unfit. Think of this as a sacred balance scale. What qualifies one group disqualifies the other. What disqualifies one group leaves the other entirely unaffected. This isn't arbitrary. It's a carefully designed system where each ministry has its own logic, its own purpose, its own standards of fitness. The Gemara will unpack this paradox, showing us that these aren't just technical distinctions. They reveal something profound about the nature of avodah, sacred service itself. Let's examine the fundamental difference. On the left, we have the Kohanim, the Kohanim. They are disqualified by mumin, physical blemishes, the defects enumerated in the Tevorah in Sefer Vayikra, chapter 21, verses 16 through 23. These might include blindness, lameness, facial disfigurement, disproportionate limbs, and the other physical impairments. But age? Age doesn't disqualify them. From the moment a Kohen reaches Gedola, majority, traditionally marked by puberty and the growth of two pubic hairs, he is fit for service for the rest of his life. On the right, we have the Leviim, the Leviim. For them, the situation is reversed. Physical blemishes? They don't matter. A Levi with the same physical imperfections that would disqualify a Kohen can serve without issue. But Shanim, the passage of years, that's what disqualifies them. They serve only between the ages of 30 and 50, as stated in Sefer Bamidbar, chapter 4, verse 47. This is the core complementary opposition, blemish versus age, physical perfection versus temporal limitation. Now, how do we know that age is the exclusive disqualifier for Leviim? The Gemara presents us with a brilliant scriptural proof from Sefer Bamidbar, chapter 8, verse 24. Zot asher leleviim, this is that which pertains to the Leviim. The word zot, this, is interpreted as an exclusive limiting term. This disqualifier, age, applies to the Leviim, and no other. It's a linguistic clue that unlocks the entire system. But the Gemara doesn't stop there. It anticipates a logical challenge, what we call a kal vachomer, and a fortiori inference. Locate the logic on the right side of the slide. Someone might argue, Kohanim are disqualified by blemishes. Kohanim are not disqualified by age, that's a lesser stringency. Therefore, Leviim, who are disqualified by age, a greater stringency, shouldn't they also be disqualified by blemishes? It's a compelling argument. If the group with a lesser restriction, Kohanim with an age limit, has the greater restriction of blemishes, shouldn't the group with a greater restriction, Leviim with an age limit, also have that same restriction? The pasuk zot asher leleviim directly refutes this inference. The Tevorah is explicit. This is what pertains to the Leviim, age, and the age alone. The Katuv blocks what would otherwise be a logical conclusion. The mirror argument works in the opposite direction. How do we prove that Kohanim are not disqualified by age? Again, the same pasuk, asher leleviim, which pertains to the Leviim. Notice the emphasis on the subject. The verse specifies that this age disqualification pertains to the Leviim, and the not which pertains to the Kohanim. It's a precise exclusion. But again, someone might mount a logical challenge. Look at the flawed conclusion in the dashed box. Leviim are not disqualified by blemishes. Leviim are disqualified by age, a greater stringency. Therefore, shouldn't Kohanim, who are disqualified by blemishes, also be disqualified by age? The subject of the verse, Tio the Leviim, directly refutes this inference. By naming the Leviim explicitly, the Tevorah confirms that Kohanim are exempt from AGBCD disqualification. It's an elegant textual solution to what could be a logical problem. But here's where it gets interesting. The age disqualification for Leviim isn't universal. It only applies when the service involves physical labor. During the wilderness period, in the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the Leviim performed avodat mashsa, the work of bearing burdens. They carried the structure of the Mishkan on their shoulders through the desert. This was physically demanding labor, and it makes sense that there would be an age window, 30 or 50, when a man is in his physical prime. But in Shiloh and Yerushalayim, in the permanent Beit HaMikdash, the temple, the situation changes. There's an more carrying. The primary service of the Leviim becomes avodat avodah, the work of service, specifically shir unegina, singing and music. The pasuk in Sefer Bamidbar 4:47 makes this explicit by juxtaposing the work of service and the work of bearing burdens. The age limit applies specifically to the physical labor context. When the disqualifier changes, when Leviim sien and no longer sing with kol echad, a unified voice, that's what renders them unfit in the period of the Beit HaMikdash, not a calendar age. Now we encounter an apparent stira, contradiction, in the Tevorah itself. One pasuk, in Sefer Bamidbar 8:24, states, מבין 25 שנה ומעלה, from TW years old and D upward. Another pasuk, in Sefer Bamidbar 4:47, states, מבין 30 שנה ומעלה, from 30 years old and D upward. Which ASIT, TW or 30? The Talmud notes, it's impossible to say 30 because TW AS already stated. And D it's impossible to say TW because 30 AS already stated. So how can these psukim be reconciled? The resolution is elegant, a TW career path. A age TW the limud, the apprenticeship, begins. This is a FIVVR period of study and training. At age 30, לעבודה, full service begins. The Levi is now qualified for active duty. This timeline structure appears at the bottom of the slide. It's a professional development model, preparation before practice. And here's where this specific halakha transforms into universal wisdom. The Gemara extrapolates from the FIVVR apprenticeship of the Leviim to create a general principle about learning and perseverance. The principle is stated powerfully. From here, it is derived that a talmid, a student, who did not see a positive indication in his studies after 5 years will no longer see a productive result from those studies. 5 years is the benchmark. If you haven't shown siman yafe b'mishnato, a positive sign in your learning, after 5 years of dedicated study, the Talmud suggests it's time to reassess. This isn't about giving up. It's about recognizing when to pivot, when to apply your energy elsewhere. Rabbi Yosef disagrees, citing Sefer Daniel. He argues for 3 years, based on a training period for Daniel and his companions in the court of Nebuchadnezzar. They were to be raised for 3 years and taught the books and the language of the Kasdim, Chaldeans. The rebuttals are illuminating. Why does one Chacham say 5 years? Because Ilchot Avodat Tekifin, the laws of temple service are difficult, Tekifin, and require more time. Why does the other say 3 years? Because Lashon Kasdim Kalil, the language of the Kasdim is easy, Kalil, and requires less time. What emerges from this specific debate about the training of the Leviim is timeless wisdom about the nature of learning, perseverance, and knowing when to change course. Unlike the Leviim with a fixed age window, the service of a Kohen is defined by physical maturation and the decline. The Baraita states, a Kohen, mishevi shte sarot ad shizkin, from the time he reaches puberty and grows 2 pubic hairs until he ages, is fit for temple service. But what does yizkin, aging, actually mean? The Gemara asks, ad kama, until when? What is the definition of aging in this context? The boundaries are marked by question marks because they define functionally, not chronologically. When does a Kohen become fit for service? When he shows physical signs of maturity. When does he age out? When his hands and the feet begin to tremble, ad shiratiat, until he trembles. The Mishna in Masechet Mikvaot provides the comparative standard. In cases involving keri, seminal emission, the question is whether residual impurity remains. Rabbi Yosef distinguishes, for a chole, an ill person, or a zaken, an elderly person, impure. For a yeled, a young person, or a bari, a healthy person, pure. The standard is physical capability, not chronological age. So when exactly does a Kohen become fit for service in the Beit HaMikdash? There are 2 opinions. Opinion achat comes from the Chachamim and is based on physical maturity. The criteria, when he reaches prak, puberty, and gidul shtei searot, grows 2 pubic hairs. The reasoning, he is now considered an ish, a man, is required by Sefer Vayikra 21:17 dakot, which states ish mizaracha, any man of your descendants. Opinion 2 comes from Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, representing chronological maturity. He holds that a Kohen is not fit until he is 20 years of age. His source is Sefer Ezra 3.28, and appointed the Leviim, from 20 years old and upward, to oversee of the work of the house of Ha. Now, that pasuk mentions Leviim, not Kohanim. But Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi relies on a principle stated by Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. In TW places in Tanakh, Kohanim nikre'u Leviim, Kohanim are called Leim. In Yechezkel 44:15, and the Kohanim the Leviim, the sons of Tzadok, is one example. The punchline appears in the box 80 the bottom, but his brethren the Kohanim do not allow him to perform the service until he is 20 years of age. Even if he's technically fit 80 puberty, practical custom required waiting until 20. It's a fascinating tension between legal qualification and the communal practice. What is the definition of zikena, aging, for a Kohen? Rabbi El'ah, citing Rabbi Chanina, gives us a vivid, functional definition, ad shiratiat, until his hands and feet begin to tremble, ad shiratiat. This isn't about chronological age. It's about physical capability. As long as a Kohen Sien performed avodah with stability and precision, he remains fit. And then the Talmud gives us a beautiful biographical note, a portrait of vitality. They said about Rabbi Chanina that he was 80 years old and could still stand on one of his legs and remove his shoe or put on his shoe. This action, being able to stand on one foot to put on his shoe, becomes the own definition of Rabbi Chanina of what it means to be physically young and hale. Rabbi Chanina himself provides the secret to his longevity, and its touching in its simplicity. He says, Chamin v'shemen shesachatani imi b'yalduti henamdu li bet zikenuti. The hot water and the oil that the my mother smeared on me in my youth benefited me in my old age. It's a moment of tenderness in the midst of legal analysis, a reminder that behind these halachot are real people, real bodies, real lives shaped by care and devotion. This slide gives us the visual and the emotional center of the testimony of Rabbi Chanina. The illustration captures that remarkable moment, an a man standing on one leg, putting on or removing his shoe. This isn't just about physical fitness. It's about what we might call functional aging, the idea that fitness for service, fitness for life, is measured not by the calendar but by capability. Rabbi Chanina embodies this principle. And these words echo across the centuries. The hot water and the oil that my mother smeared on me in my youth benefited me in my old age. It's a statement about investment, about how care in youth creates resilience in age. It's about gratitude, memory, and the long arc of the Levite life. In the context of a sugaya, Rabbi Chanina becomes the living proof of the ideal for the Kohanim, service defined not by arbitrary age limits, but by the actual capacity of the body to perform sacred work with steadiness and dignity. Now let's bring IT all together in a comprehensive chart. This table lets us see the complete architecture of the complementary opposition between Kohanim and the Leviim. Primary disqualification. For Kohanim, mum, blemish. For Leviim, shanim, age. Age of onset. For Kohanim, prak, puberty, though the factor 20 years old. For Leviim, 25 for limud, apprenticeship, 30 for avodah, service. Age of retirement. For Kohanim, ratitat, physical trembling, a functional measure. For Leviim, 50 in the wilderness when carrying the Mishkan, loss of vocal unity in the period of the Beit HaMikdash. Key labor in the wilderness. For Kohanim, avodat karbanot, sacrificial service. For Leviim, mashasa, carrying the Mishkan. Key labor in the temple. For Kohanim, avodat karbanot, sacrificial service. For Leviim, shir unegina, singing and music. Scriptural basis. For Kohanim, ספר ויקרא 21, יחזקאל 44. For Leviim, ספר במדבר 4, ספר במדבר 8, ספר עזרא 3. Every element reveals purposeful design. The qualifications aren't random. They're precisely tailored to the specific nature of the work of each group. What have we learned from this passage? 3 fundamental insights emerge. First, precision and the purpose. The halacha is not arbitrary. Qualifications are precisely tailored to the specific nature of the avodah. Physical perfection for ritual proximity, the Kohen must be physically whole to approach the Mizbeach. Physical strength for carrying, the Levi must be in his prime to bear the weight of the Mishkan. Vocal purity for liturgical song, the Levi must be able to blend his voice seamlessly with his brothers. Second, evolution of roles. The Tevorah demonstrates an inherent adaptability to changing circumstances. The qualifications of the Leviim evolve from the needs of a mobile Mishkan in the desert, mashasa, bearing burdens, to those of a permanent Beit HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, shir, song. The system isn't static. IT responds to historical reality while maintaining its essential principles. Third, from ritual to wisdom. Specific, technical discussions of halacha become springboards for timeless principles. A debate on the training period of the Leviim yields universal wisdom about the nature of learning, perseverance, and the knowing when to change course. The FAVVR benchmark isn't just about service in the Beit HaMikdash, it's about recognizing when a path isn't bearing fruit, about the wisdom of reassessment. In DSO we return to where we began, a tale of 2 ministries. The Kohanim, standing before the Mizbeach, their fitness measured by physical wholeness, serving from maturity until their hands tremble. The Leviim, carrying the holy structure, later lifting their voices in song, their fitness measured by age and the vocal unity. 2 ministries. 2 standards. 1 sacred purpose. What emerges from Masechet Chullin 24a-b is a vision of Avodat Hashem that honors both permanence and delimitation, both physical perfection and the temporal boundary. It's a system of complementary opposition, where what disqualifies one group leaves the other untouched, and the vice versa. And perhaps most importantly, IT reminds us that behind every category of halacha, behind every technical distinction, stand real people, like Rabbi Chanina 8080, standing on one leg, grateful for the care of his mother, living out these principles with grace and dignity. Thank you for joining me on this analytical journey through Talmud, Masechet Chullin.